Welcome to the GTC TV and the webinar series. Today we have a special guest, as always. This seminar is presented by Méndez University and wonderful faculty members that every month have the opportunity and also share their time and information to educate us, to empower us with new tools and information that is going to help us to improve, expand, to grow our business. And today is not an exception. We have our special guest, Professor Olga V, and let me tell you a little bit about Professor V. She's an executive, very successful executive, exemplary leadership in human capital management, and holds a dual SRHMCP and PHR certifications. She's also a faculty member of Méndez since 2009. Imparting classes in what, Olga? Well,
in business, human resources, communications, marketing.
So different classes, right? And well, Miss Olga has been working with Méndez for years now, as you can see, since 2009. But also she's an entrepreneur because she runs her own business. And we're going to share a little bit about what she does. But she specializes in managing employee relations, in regulatory compliance, optimizing operational efficiency across diverse multi-unit, multi-state operations throughout multiple industries. So she's going to explain us more about this. Let me welcome Olga to our welcome.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everybody. Yes, like Maria mentioned, my name is Olga V. I've been a professor here at Méndez since 2009. I've been in the human resources space for over 20 years, in multiple industries, multi-location, multi-state. And today, apart from all of that, I also am the founder and president of TUA's Top Tips. And our mission is to educate and provide information and resources to small and medium-sized business owners, especially in our Latino community, so they kind of understand how they need to run their business from their people perspective, right? Because you can have a business in whatever, but without people in your business, you really can't move your business forward. And one of the biggest assets that you have is your people, but one of your biggest problems is also your people. So our business helps you and guides businesses through managing those people problems.
And what you're saying is so important because you said something that is extremely important, especially for small entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that are just starting a company or they are probably expanding the employees. You need to have a good team that is going to help you to execute your projects, but in a proper way. Like you said, it can be a positive and also a negative, right?
Yeah, I've seen, not to get into too many stories, but I've seen a lot of small businesses get hit with a lot of, claims and sues and legal issues just because they did that one thing wrong, they fired that one person wrong, or they paid that one person incorrectly, and for a small, medium-sized business, that's very impactful. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars that you're paying in lawyer fees and claims and whatnots, and it impacts, the success or failure of your business. And it can, if it's really, really big, right, you have to close down because now you don't have enough money to continue to run your business.
But also the fact of not having qualified employees to run that specific project or task. As a Chamber of Commerce, we see all the time companies that are going through some problems, especially with the team, because they don't have qualified people. And that's one of the things that are happening right now. More companies are subcontracting overseas companies. And they don't, because obviously it's less expensive, let's put it that way. But also you get for what you pay, right? Because
right.
the performance and the quality of the job is not necessarily what you need. And that's happening not just with the small companies. Let me tell you, it's happening with large organizations like banks and telecommunication companies. So many times when I have to call the bank, they don't transfer me to actually the corporation, right? They transfer some country where I can identify immediately I'm not speaking with somebody in the US. And the problem with that is not the accent. Believe me, I have accent.
Right.
The problem with that is that they are just reading a manual, and
Correct.
they don't really help you too much. Because if you have
Correct.
a question, they don't know how to help you unless it's not in the manual. And that is very frustrating. And I've been, not just me, but a lot of people that I know in this environment has the same challenge when they want to call customer service. That's one of the problems. And also with human resources is the fact that you think that you have to be big to manage human resources, and that's not necessarily true. And Olga today is going to teach us all those facts. So I'm not going to talk too long about this. I'm going to let Olga, which is again professor in this area, to do the presentation. Go ahead, Olga. The screen is
All right. Well, thank you for that introduction. And yes, today we're going to talk a little bit about that, right? And what I want to especially stress today is on the employee classifications, only because, to your point earlier, a lot of business owners feel that, because they have 5 employees, 7 employees, 10 employees, 20 employees, that they don't really have to comply with a lot of these regulations. And once you have one employee, there's already 12 different laws that you have to comply with from an employee HR perspective. And one of those is how you're going to classify and how you're going to pay that particular employee, right? And we have company sizes anywhere from 1 to 15 to 20 and to 50, right? And as you can see, depending on your company size, the regulations and laws that you have to comply with from an HR perspective, they just get bigger and bigger and more complicated and more complicated. And one of the ones that's the foundation to everything that you're doing in your business is that employee classification, right? Do you have employees? Do you have independent contractors? Or do you have both? And I see a lot of small business owners classify their employees as independent contractors because they want to save costs on benefits or taxes or insurance. And at the end of the day, that really exposes you bigger if you're actually misclassifying them, because not only would you have to pay them back wages if you were to ever get a claim, you also have to pay them back insurance and 401k and any benefit that you might have offered. You have to pay penalties and interest on any mistakes that you might have done. So sometimes, doing the right thing from the beginning might cost you a little bit more money, but at the end, it's going to save you a lot more. So let's talk a little bit about what this means. And from an independent contractor versus an employee perspective, there's 3 different agencies that manage this process. You have the IRS, which we all know, right? The Internal Revenue Service. You have the Department of Labor, which is the one that manages wages and hour. And you have the National Labor Relations Board. The National Labor Relations Board is the agency that manages unions, that manages collective bargaining agreements. And even though they are not typically found of small businesses, they still have the ability to formalize a union within a small business anywhere from 5 employees or more, right? So these are all the different agencies that manage the definition of independent contractor versus an employee. And sometimes the definition within all 3 agencies are not exactly the same. So it's really tricky, and there's a lot of gray area that you have to navigate when you are trying to decide if this person is going to be an independent contractor or if I'm going to have this person as an employee. So let's dive into some of these definitions. The first one we're going to talk about is independent contractor. And this is someone that you typically bring on board because they're going to do a specific project, right? They're going to do a task. They're going to do something that is one and done, right? You're going to have someone come in, do this project, do this task for a certain amount of time, and then they're going to go away, right? This person typically has control of their time, control of their costs. Most of the time, they have their own tools to do whatever job you need, whether those are physical tools or intellectual tools, right? This is someone that's going to pay their own taxes, have their own financial fiduciary responsibilities that you don't have to manage that process. And typically someone you come into a contract with, right? And you decide, okay, under these terms and conditions, this is the project that you're going to do. Once you complete the milestones of the project, once you complete the project, you get paid, you go home, right? That's what an independent contractor is. An employee is someone you bring on board who's going to complete a task or outcome specifically to the way you do your business, right? And this is where it gets a little bit tricky because I have heard, for example, business owners that say, well, my receptionist is an independent contractor because I have a contract with her, I pay her, she goes home, and she's okay with that. The burden of that is not on the employee, actually, it's on the employer. So even though you might say, well, the employee is okay with being an independent contractor, at the end of the day, the responsibility is yours, not the employee, right? So going back to my example, a receptionist is not an independent contractor. Why? Because you are determining the hours of operation of that receptionist. You're determining what tools she or he are going to use to conduct or perform those jobs or those duties, right? You're going to tell them you have to do it during this time. This is the phone number you have to answer. This is what you're going to have to answer. All of those terms and conditions of that job, of that employment, you as the employer are providing them to that employee, right? So if you are responsible for all of those things, this person is an employee. If this is a job that the company needs to exist, receptionist jobs, accountants, things like that, those are jobs within your business that you need, right? So let's say you have a plumbing business and you have a plumber that you want to consider an independent contractor. There's two ways you can look at that. You can say, hey, let's put a contract together. And whenever I need you, I call you, right? If I have a plumber job and I can't fill it myself, give you a call. And if you're available, go ahead and do that. That could be considered an independent contractor, right? Because why? You're not controlling the hours of operation. You're not controlling what tools they have. You're not controlling their truck, right? Their truck doesn't have to be marked with your logo, with your company information, none of those things. However, if you still have that same plumbing company and you're like, okay, I want to hire 3 plumbers, but they need to wear my uniform, their truck needs to have my company logo, I'm going to give them the tools, I'm going to receive all the orders in the morning, and I'm going to assign those orders to those employees. At the end of the day, they need to come back, report what happened. That's an employee, right? You cannot categorize that person as an independent contractor because you, the employer, are controlling everything that's happening with that employee. And this is really important because sometimes, depending on what agency is looking at that classification of independent contractor versus employee, those terms and conditions might be a little bit different, right? If you're looking at it from the IRS perspective, from the Department of Labor perspective, or from the National Labor Relations Board perspective. So who has the control? And this, at the end of the day, is the test that these different agencies are going to do to determine if this person is actually an employee or if this person was actually an independent contractor. And different agencies, the 3 different agencies have 3 different tests or 3 different questions that you should ask yourself when you're determining that classification. Let's start with the Department of Labor. Under the Department of Labor, you have the Fair Labor Standards Act. The Fair Labor Standards Act is the act that controls minimum wage. And why this is important is because if you misclassify an employee and you classify them as an independent contractor instead of an employee, the Fair Labor Standards Act is the one that's going to come in and say, hey, you misclassified this person. Now you owe them all of these wages. Now you owe them all of these overtime wages and or benefits because you classified them incorrectly. That's all under the Department of Labor. And under the Department of Labor, they use what's called the economics reality test, right? And they have 5 different factors. 2 of the factors are core factors, meaning that these 2 core factors have a little bit of more weight when that determination or that question comes up, right? And the 2 core factors are 1, the nature and degree of the worker's control over the work, right? That worker, who's controlling the work of that individual. And number 2, the worker's opportunity for profit and loss, meaning how are you paying that worker? Are you paying them an hourly rate? Is that person having the ability to quote you whatever price they feel is good for that job? Or are you telling that person, I'm only going to pay you $15 an hour for this job, right? Those are the two core factors. Now, the other three factors, if the two core factors are not completely 100% clear, the other factors will come in and help make that determination if you classify the person correctly or not. And there you have the amount of skill required for the job, the degree of permanence of the working relationship. Is this something that's short, 2, 3 months, 6 months, or is this something that's going to take 5, 10 years? And the work is part of an integrated unit of production, meaning does this job is this job relevant to the everyday function of this business? Or is this job something that just needs to come in, get done, and leave, right? For example, you have an electrical problem in your office. You hire an independent contractor to come in, fix your electricity, and he leaves and he moves on, right? That's an independent contractor. If you have an office, a doctor's office, and you have a receptionist role available, and you want to hire someone to do that job, that's an integral part of your business, right? Because if you don't pick up the phone and make appointments, the doctor doesn't have patients, right? So those are the other factors as far as the economics realities test from the Department of Labor. The second agency that we talked about is the Internal Revenue Service. Now, the Internal Revenue Service is going to look at it purely from an economical standpoint, right? It's not necessarily the job functions, right? They're going to look more on the financial side of the difference between an independent contractor and an employee. And they have what's called the common law test. This test has multiple areas. The first one is the behavioral, right? And these are the questions that they're going to ask you if you are ever in a situation where you're caught in a misclassification. The first one is, does the company control or have the rights to control what the worker does and how the worker does his or her job? Who is controlling the job? Who is controlling the day-to-day functions of that job? Is it the person, right, the worker, or is it the employer? If I am saying to this person, listen, our office opens from Tuesday to Friday from 10 to 7, and you have to come in within that time, and you have to wear a company uniform, and you need a ID badge to come in, and you have to comply with all the rules and regulation of the business, that's not necessarily an independent contractor, right? That might be an employee. The second common law test from the IRS is the financial piece, right? Are the business aspect of the worker's job controlled by the payer? Am I setting the financial aspect of this project? So in other words, am I saying this is what you're going to get paid for that job? Or is that worker telling me as the business owner, nope, I'm quoting you $12,000 for this job, or I'm quoting you, $3,000 for that job, and that's what I want to get paid to do this job. So whoever's controlling that process of the negotiation is the question that this is trying to answer, right? Who is controlling that? If it's the worker, then it might be an independent contractor. If it's the employer or the owner, then it might actually be an employee. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't negotiate, right? If it's an independent contractor, as a business owner, you want to negotiate that, but you are not putting the actual terms of payment. The independent contractor is. The third piece is the type of relationship. Are there written contracts or employee benefits that you are either offering or giving, or the person is requesting, right? Will the relationship continue, and is the work performed a key aspect of the business, which also is tied to what the Department of Labor is asking, right? You can't say, I have a plumbing business, to go back to that example, and say, well, I'm going to hire a receptionist and she's going to be an independent contractor. But in order for me to get appointments, I need the receptionist to answer the phone and make the appointments, right? So your job cannot function unless you actually have a receptionist, or maybe you're not big enough that you need a receptionist, but that's a different story. So the type of relationship is what they're looking for. Is this a key essential function of your business? Let's say you're a restaurant, right? You need a waiter. Without a waiter, you don't have a business. You need a chef. Without a chef, you don't have a business, right? So those are the kind of things that they're looking for. You can't outsource a waiter. You can't outsource or have a hostess as an independent contractor, right? Because in order to have a business and in a restaurant, those are the kind of positions you actually need in that restaurant, okay? The third one we're going to look at is the National Labor Relation Board. And the National Labor Relation Board is probably the one that is the most complicated, only because what they're trying to do is they're trying to make it really, really difficult for an employer to identify someone as an independent contractor, especially small and medium-sized businesses, because they know that business owners do that in order to avoid having to pay taxes and benefits and things like that for this group of people. So they have a slew of different elements that they use in their common law agency test. They all boil down to the same thing, right? Who at the end of the day has control of that relationship? Is it the employer, right? And I, the employer, making the terms and conditions of that job? Or is it the employee? Let's say you have a distribution business and you have delivery folks, right? And you want to outsource those delivery people. But at the same time, you're telling those delivery people, okay, well, you have to wear my uniform. You have to work during these hours of operation. You have to have this type of insurance. You have to have this type of truck. Your truck has to be wrapped in my logo with my information. That's a very fine line between an independent contractor and employee. If you look at the common law agency test from the NLRB, it's probably going to look like it's an employee, not an independent contractor. So really careful with what you're doing and how you're classifying those individuals. So how can this affect your business? And at the beginning of the session, we talked a little bit about that, right? There's a lot of different things that can affect your business. And the biggest one that we're scared of is the financial piece, right? Because that financial piece can cause a lot of trouble in our business and at times can even make our business slow down or close because we can't meet the financial requirements. So some of the things that can happen from a financial perspective is penalties and fines. And not only from, let's say, the IRS, but the Department of Labor can also add penalties and fines. The National Labor Relation Board could come in and require you to pay additional back wages or some kind of settlement because now that individual's life was impaired because you were not paying that person correctly. So things like wage, tax, and employment. You're going to have to pay back wages to that individual if you've misclassified a person, right? And those back wages, depending on how it was determined that it came to be, right? It came to light that you were misclassifying someone. It could be anywhere from 2 to 3 years back. So anywhere from 24 to 36 months of minimum wage, you're going to have to pay that individual. Within that time, they're going to come up, and when I mean they, I mean the employee, their attorney, the Department of Labor, they're going to come up with a number and say, well, yes, and by the way, I also worked all these hours of overtime that now you have to pay me an overtime rate. And what will happen is instead of paying, especially here in the state of Florida, now you're going to have to pay all of that with today's current rate. You're not going to be able to pay it with the rate, 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So that's number one. Within that, also number one, they're also going to look at if there's other employees that were affected with the same misclassification, and they're going to reach out to those people and say, hey, by the way, you misclassified, so there might be money that this employer owes you. The second one is the tax and payroll fines, right? You have state and federal payroll, you have Social Security, Medicare taxes, and this is not only the taxes that the employer is supposed to pay. There are times where they might make you as the employer pay the employee portion of those taxes. And again, it's going to go back 3 years, right? If you have, for example, if you offered medical insurance, if you offered 401k and you offer, matching that 401k, all of that money that you should have paid that employee for the past 24 to 36 months, you're going to have to pay back that person with penalties and interest and calculations from that money as well. So not only is the wages, but it's also the taxes and the payroll fines. Then you have legal and punitive damages, right? So now you have to pay your attorney, now you have to pay their attorney, which never looks good, right? When you have to pay attorneys, they start ranking those hours up. And then you have reputational damage, which that one is really, you can't really put a price to that, a number to that, but now you're going to be known as one of those companies that didn't pay their employees correctly, right? And that just messes up the way you do your business only because you'll have repercussions on things like now the word gets out, People hear about how you are. You're an unfair employer. Nobody wants to work for you. You can't hire people. So it gets a little bit complicated, and to recover from that, it's a little bit difficult, right? Not only that, now you are on the radar, right? Now they're watching you to see if you're going to do it again, or now you already have a claim, so now lawyers know that you're more vulnerable. So it's a really big deal, even though you might think it's simple, even though you might think, well, I'm saving taxes today, which is probably maybe $700 a year, rather than classifying them correctly and not getting into any legal issues in the future. So what can I do to check or correct this type of issue, right? Because there are corrective matters. It doesn't mean that because you might be doing it incorrectly today that, oh my God, now I'm stuck, right? Now, no, there are things that we can do as a corrective measure to make sure that you are, correcting your issue and or auditing yourself. So these are just some of the questions that I put together where you could start, right? Is this a task project that I will permanently need in my business, right? Is this something that without this job or without this task, my business can't function? And you have to be really realistic with that, right? Don't try to like babysit or make excuses for that. Let's be really realistic with the permanency of that function. If I do not have someone doing this task or project, can I continue operating my business? And sometimes the answer might be yes. Sometimes the answer might be no, right? And this goes back to how you're classifying that individual. How long will this project or task take? If this is a one-off, right? Something that I need someone to come in, fix my files, audit, do a whole revamp of the warehouse, let's say, that's going to take 3 to 6 months. That's a task. That's not something that you need to operate every day your business. Do I need to control the hours of operation? Let's say, this person needs to work a certain amount of hours only because these are the hours that you are open. That's something that you might want to look at, right? That's a little bit of a gray area when it comes to trying to classify someone as an independent contractor. Will the work limit the ability of the individual to have or market to other clients? Will I have them work 40 hours a week? This is where it gets probably the most tricky, right? Because you might have an independent contractor. Let's say you have to fix your IT services, right? And you're going to do new cabling because now you have new internet. You might have to hire an IT consultant that comes in. That person might work 40 hours a week for you, right? For maybe 3 weeks because you need to get this done quickly. But in the back of your mind, this person is only going to come and work for 3 weeks. The difference is, do I need an IT consultant to always manage my software? And does this person need to be on site? Does this person need to work for me 40 hours a week? Those are the kind of questions that you need to ask yourself when you are looking at, how you're classifying your individuals. Will I control the prices or the rates for the services, or will the individual provide a proposal we might need to negotiate? Okay. Again, another big component. Who is controlling the financial aspect of the relationship? Are you setting up a contract with someone, let's say the receptionist in my example earlier, and saying, well, I'm going to pay you $15 an hour and you're going to work from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, but you're an independent contractor, so I need you to sign this independent contractor agreement and be okay with that, right? That's not an independent contractor because you're controlling the hours of operation and you're controlling the actual financial aspect of that relationship, right? So, and again, just so you know, even if the employee agrees to that, the employee has 24 months to come back and say, you paid me incorrectly, even if they don't work for you anymore. You paid me incorrectly, you owe me time, you owe me overtime. And they would actually have a claim, right? So be really careful with thinking that because the employee agreed to it and because the employee signed the agreement, that that's still okay. Minimizing some of the misclassification problems, the first thing you can do is create a job description. This job description should outline the role, the responsibilities of the task, right? Determine the level of control for the payer and the payee. We've talked about that. Identify the length of the task. How long? Is it seasonal? Is it project-based? Is it temporary? Is it part-time? what will be the payment method for the task, right? Is this going to be an hourly pay? Is this going to be per project? Is this going to be per deliverable, so that after every milestone, I'm going to pay you a piece of that portion? How are you going to describe this, right? And when you create a job description, that job description outlines a lot of these things, right? You're going to be able to know, based on the job description and the roles and responsibilities of that job, if that job is actually something that I need in my business from a day-to-day standpoint, or is this something that I can consult someone with and maybe bring them in once a week, once a month, have a couple of hours in accrual every month where I can just pick up the phone and say, listen, I have an issue. Can you help me with it? Or is this an actual job function that I need for the day-to-day operation of my business? Okay. Remedy programs. And if you were to ever get to a situation where now, someone has put in a claim, or you feel like, oh my God, wait a minute, I might be misclassifying some individuals in my business, there are remedial programs. We have the IRS Classification Settlement Program and the IRS Voluntary Classification Settlement Program. The IRS Voluntary Classification Program, it provides the opportunity for you to reclassify an employee voluntarily, meaning that you realize that you made an error, right? You realize that you made a mistake, and now you want to correct that error. The IRS Classification Settlement Program also allows you to adjust and correct misclassifications when you already have a claim, right? Because you could say, listen, I had no idea. I had no clue that this was happening or how it worked. And there are remedial programs to help you. Now, what will happen sometimes is that not only will you get audited for all your other positions, they might put an auditor for the next, let's say, 12 to 24 months to every once in a while come in, check in, see if you're still doing it correctly, if you've corrected your issues, if not. So regardless, typically, there are some remedial things you can do, but at the end of the day, once it's been brought to your attention and once you have a claim, you're not going to get away with it scot-free. There are going to be some penalties, some fines. There might be minimal, right? But there will be some penalties and fines within what you are going to have to pay to correct those issues, and not looking at the back pay that you're going to have to obligatorily pay, right? So you're going to have to always pay that individual the back pay and pay that individual the back overtime pay and the taxes. Okay. So there are ways for you to, correct the issue, right? If you feel like right now you're in a situation where you're not really sure what to do, or you're not really sure, if you are classifying someone correctly or not, the best thing to do is to just start that process of asking yourself the main questions, right? Ask yourself, is this a job that I need permanently? Who's controlling the payment here? Those are the kind of things you want to look for when you are thinking about maybe if you're doing it correctly or incorrectly. So again, just to recap, just some things to remember. Although each agency has their own method, right, to classify and ask the questions on independent contractor versus employee, they all err on the side of the employee. So their initial response will always be in favor of that employee, not in favor of you. You as the business owner, you as the employer, you're always going to have to be the one that's proving that you did it correctly or not. Okay. So important to remember the level of control that you have with that individual, right? Things like schedules, uniforms, infrastructure, cost, pay, having the same employee as an independent contractor, an employee, huge red flag, guys. Okay. If you're giving this person a 1099 and you're giving this person a W-2, and they complete their taxes with that information, huge red flag. That's one of the things the IRS uses to kind of catch employers in this issue. Wage claims can go back up to 3 years, and classification settlement programs are there to assist an employer that's being investigated or needs to investigate that. And just to close, that is part of what I help businesses with. That's something that we at Tua Top Tips help businesses with, as far as, understanding how to classify an employee correctly, training, compliance, onboarding, all of these things. So this is the end of my presentation, guys. I hope that you have some useful information that you can use to determine the difference between classifying someone as an independent contractor versus an employee. So I'm not really sure if we have any questions, but I will pass it now to you guys.
Well, for sure, they're going to have a lot of questions because this topic was so important and at the same time, so complex, right? Like you really need to understand the classifications, as you mentioned. And unless you are in this industry, probably you have no clue. So the best way for you to run your business is to hire somebody like you, a company that can help you to process all this. Because when you do your taxes, it's not the same like having an accountant to do your taxes or a bookkeeper. But when you have a human resources specialist, that's a little bit different because you're talking about other elements. And to be honest with you, to learn a lot about the classifications, I have no clue about a few things. And one of the things that got my attention, for example, is the difference between the workers' compensation and then unemployment. We sometimes get confused about these two categories. Another thing also when, for example, the difference between when a company fire you and when you decide to leave.
Right.
So in that way, what the benefits are or your responsibilities. What happened in that instance, Olga?
When an employer decides to terminate you, obviously we in Florida are an at-will state, right? So they can fire you with or without reason. You can leave with or without reason. And the difference really is in that unemployment piece, right? Typically, when an employer fires you or separates ways with you, that will affect the unemployment portion for you. If you resign, typically unemployment is something that is not approved because you are voluntarily making the decision to leave an employer, right? If an employer separates or terminates you, you typically will be awarded unemployment. However, it depends on the reason why they are terminating you. If they're terminating you because you didn't perform, if they're terminating you because you got into a fight or you stole, unemployment will probably not award you unemployment for those reasons, right? But if they have a reduction in hours, if they have to close their operations because they're not making money, then typically, unemployment will award you unemployment. All the other benefits, such as medical, 401k, all of those things, they apply the same regardless if the employer separates with you or if you separate with the employee, with the employer. And another thing is some employers also give you a severance pay, especially if they need to close their operations. They might give you some kind of, financial component for you to ease that kind of transition.
So let me see if I understand this part. When you downsize, is as just and you fire somebody, is a reason for you as a company to pay benefits on unemployment. But if this person that you fired is because lack of performance or it happens something, ethical, you not necessarily are obligated to pay the unemployment.
Correct. What will happen is the unemployment, regardless of what the separation is, the unemployment agency will always send the employer a form that says, okay, we got the termination from this employee. Was this, voluntary, or was this because of, operation? Was this because this person, fought at the workplace, right? And that's where you kind of classify, what the reason was for separation. And if you have backup data, let's say a warning notice, or let's say, you did an investigation and you have like pictures of them fighting or whatever, you can send that to the state unemployment agency and they will deny that individual's claim. And that helps the employer because at the end of the day, you're paying taxes for that person or for all of your employees based on that unemployment rate, right? And if you have more unemployments that are being paid out to people, then obviously your rate goes up. But if you have to downsize, you really don't have a choice, right? You have to downsize. But if it's because someone did something bad, then yes, you have a choice to say, no, I'm not going to pay this person unemployment because they decided to steal or have a fight.
Another thing that also got my attention is the part between the W-2s and the 1099s, which is the independent contractors. Sometimes people prefers to be an employee with a W-2 because they want to receive the benefits. So they
Right.
prefer to have the discounts, what I believe is about 30% in total.
Right. It's about 27 to 30%. Yeah.
But some people prefer to receive the 1099 because they want to have the full amount. So in
Mhm.
this instance, what would be your advice? What is the best option to get this job?
So the best option is that it's not the employee's choice. And that's one of the things I see a lot of employers ask is, but the employee wants to be 1099. It's not the employee's choice to be a 1099 or W-2. It's the actual job, right? If that job is supposed to be W-2, you need to pay that person as a W-2 because like I said, 24 months from now or 20 months from now, this person might need money and they're going to remember that you paid them as a 1099. And now they're going to come back and say, well, you owe me all this time because I should have been an hourly employee. And again, the burden of proof goes back to the employer. So you can sit there in front of the judge or the investigator and say, well, the employee wanted to be a 1099. They don't want to hear that, right? It's not the employee's choice. It's the employer, the one that's supposed to put the terms and say, no, this is a job that needs to be a W-2.
So for companies that are watching this seminar, be cautious about this part. It's extremely important because if you want to hire, you're in the process of hiring people, make sure about the type of job they're going to do and how many hours they're going to be working, because it's not what you want with the employee or the agreement you have. It's about what Olga is saying about the responsibilities. So what I understand in this part is that if somebody's going to work more than 40 hours or 40 hours, definitely that's an employee full-time and that's a W-2. But a 1099 will be somebody that works hours during the week. Is that correct?
I wouldn't use that as the only element, only because you can have an independent contractor that works 40 hours a week, right? Because they're coming in for 3 months and they're doing a particular job. But in order for them to do it in 3 months, they have to work 40 hours a week. So I wouldn't use that as a gauge. I would use more of like the actual job of what they're going to do. Is because you might have people that are part-time, but you need that job to be part-time. I mean, another way to, I would say probably maybe save on benefits is, instead of having a full-timer where you might need to, pay all these benefits, maybe you have two part-time individuals, right, that do the same job. But I wouldn't necessarily
So it's
use it.
not by the number of hours, it's the
Correct.
responsibility, the task. So
Correct.
what
It's the
will be a
actual task.
qualification for a full-time in a task, like a sales representative or a secretary?
I would say things like receptionists, things like, administrative assistants. For example, a big one is paralegals. A lot of attorneys classify paralegals, for example, as, salaried, let's say, which that's another topic. But those are positions that are, those are actual positions in your business. Those are typically not independent contractors. An independent contractor could be like, if you're in a doctor's office and you need an anesthesiologist, right? That could be an independent contractor because that person comes in for the day of the surgery, they do what they need to do and they leave, right? You can have a a warehouse where you need to have deliveries on Tuesdays. That delivery driver could be an independent contractor because you only need him on Tuesdays, right? Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Mondays, he can work for somebody else. So probably maybe if you want to bring it down to one is this person going to only work for me or can they work for somebody else during the same amount of time? Would probably be the biggest, element that you could use to answer the question.
And how you can classify employees that work, let's say in this case, like a subcontract or overseas, or they are not necessarily inside the company, but you work with them.
Yes, and those can be considered independent contractors because what you do is you build a contract around that person's quote unquote company, right? Or that individual. So that person can be an independent contractor. You send them, these are the requirements, these are the levels of service. because the hours might be a little bit different. The method of operating might be a little bit different. They are out of the country. What I typically recommend is if you're going to outsource overseas, outsource it to a company, not an actual individual. Make that person, get a company or a company name or something like that, and make a contract with the company and say, I'm going to outsource this to XYZ company.
Oh, for taxes purposes.
Right.
I see. Yeah, and in that case, you classify as a 1099 to this contract.
Correct.
Oh, that's
correct.
Wow, so many things to learn.
We could go on for hours, man.
I know. But if you want to learn more about this, you need to contact Professor Tua. Obviously, she knows everything about this stuff, so don't miss that opportunity. Sometimes we think that, not necessarily hiring a professional like Professor Tua is important for you to run your business, but it is. Because I have been seeing in years, managing the Chamber of Commerce, that the first thing you do is you start your company and you start selling, but you don't have the foundation clear. You don't have, the foundation organized. So when you start growing, you start having a lot of problems because you never thought about all these details, which is extremely important. So my advice for everybody, look for information, find out about this, all this amazing presentation, but especially contact Professor Tua at this information that we're sharing on the screen. Here is her email and the phone number. You can also visit her website, and I'm sure that she's going to be able to give you all the answers that you need. Thank you, Professor Tua. This was an amazing. I was writing down and taking notes because this is so important to learn and very informative. So I'm so pleased to have you on our show today. I'm very grateful for the information that you share with us. So again,
of course,
thank you so much. Go ahead.
Anytime. And I do want to share that, for all of those that are listening, I do have different options, right? Of helping and servicing. And, I have different programs because I know that from a small business perspective, we don't have hundreds and thousands of dollars to pay, outside people to help us. So I've tried to take that into consideration so that we can help our fellow small business, medium-sized business owners, especially in our Latino community, that need a little bit of help sometimes. But thank you for having me, Maria. This was great.
This is amazing. We're going to also nominate you as a successful women in business. That's a separate topic. But we will sending you information regarding that. You're an amazing, successful entrepreneur. And you know what? You have to be part of the Women in Business Network that we have also here at the Chamber.
Of course. I would love that.
Where are you located? In what city?
Right now I'm in Miami.
Oh, okay. So we're neighbors, basically.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm actually here at the school right now.
Oh, amazing. All right. So for everybody, also keep in mind that this presentation is being sponsored by Méndez University. By the way, they have a campus here in Miami, in North Miami to be precisely. But also Méndez has different branches, campuses in other cities. I believe it's Tampa. They have another in Orlando, of course, in Puerto Rico. And if you are not located in any of these locations, you can visit the website, Méndez. What is the website? It's
www.agmu.edu.
Perfect. So please, Jonathan, share that link on the screen, because they also have different programs that you can take it actually online in Spanish and in English. And I believe there's also the bilingual program where you can actually learn in English and Spanish. So you have to visit the school to learn more about all the amazing programs. Thank you so much, everybody. See you next time. And thank you, Olga, for your time. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.